What's up, everyone, and welcome to the First Class Lacrosse podcast. My name is Deemer, and today I'm joined by my co-host, Matt Dunn. We're thrilled to sit down with one of the brightest leaders in the college game, Yale University head coach Erica Bamford. A former U.S. national team member, Coach Bamford had led Yale to truly unprecedented heights. The unanimous 2024 Ivy League Coach of the Year, she's guided the Bulldogs to back-to-back Ivy League tournament titles and back-to-back trips to the NCAA tournament quarterfinals. Yale is coming off two historic seasons under her leadership. In 2025, the Bulldogs won 16 games, the second most in school history, and climbed as high as number 4 in the IL Women National Poll. The year before, in 2024, they set the program record with 17 wins, including 2 tournament victories, and captured the program's first outright Ivy League championship by going 7-0 in league play. That group also brought home Yale's first ever Ivy League tournament title and rose to number 1 in the RPI and number 6 in the IL Women and IWLCA National Poll, while rewriting the record book for goals, assists, points, caused turnovers, and draw controls in program history. We're excited to dive into how she's built this standard at Yale, her journey through the sport, and the principles that drive her teams. Coach, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. When you reached out, I was really excited about this. I've seen some of the great coaches and people that you've had on, so I really appreciate the opportunity to be with you today.
Yeah, well, we're excited to have you as well. And before we get started, we like to start with an opener, and we do some research. And word on the street is that you go all out for Halloween. That seems to be your MO. Can you talk us through this year? Can you talk us through this year's Halloween costume?
Oh gosh, I don't know who you've been speaking with. Okay,
This word on the street.
so I do love Halloween. I've always loved Halloween. Now I took a break from Halloween a little bit, as I started my head coaching journey here at Yale. And like we've got business to take care of. Well, the last couple of years we really have we've gone all out. So oh gosh, this year. So I don't know where you've heard this. However, we as a staff were Renaissance folks for Halloween this year. I have to say, this is truly inspired by assistant coach Brooklyn Newman, who has reinvigorated my love for Halloween. Spooky season starts for Brooklyn right around September 1st. And so she's like, we have to get our costumes organized. It started with usually in the beginning of practice, we split. So attack goes to one end, the defense goes to another. Colleen and Brooklyn take the defense to the other side. Molly and I are doing shooting drills with the attack, harping on, we've got to get placement, make sure your shoulders are right, all this other stuff. We look down, the defense is hysterically laughing. They come down to the other end to join. We start next drill. Every other phrase out of them is hear he, hear he. And I'm like, oh my God, what happened down at the other end? I'm like, you guys, we have limited time in the fall. Let's get going here. Like, why? So it stuck somehow. I still to this day do not know what they were talking about down at that end. So this year for Halloween, we all dressed as Renaissance people, I guess. Colleen had a full script. We came out of the team room to trumpets playing and the introduction by Colleen, who was also dressed in Renaissance attire. When I left that morning for practice, I think my kids were like, what is she wearing? I wore that thing proudly. It was a full character for the entire practice. So it was great. Brooklyn had eyebrows, a beard. I mean, she went all out for that as well. So
that's awesome. Great. That's like Bridgerton vibes,
we were all like dressed as like kings and scribes and, but that's what it was this year. So it was fun. And the kid, our players, I think they thought it was funny. So that was good. That was good about that. So we have fun with it.
That's
the only
awesome.
rule is you have to be able to play, coach, ref, all that in your costume. That's it. Those are only
so none of those those inflatable ostriches or dinosaurs that.
No, you have to have a backup costume underneath if that's what you're planning to do.
Somehow Deemer was able to secure a photo of your Lord outfit that maybe we'll have to.
We'll keep that off air, but I won't out my sources. No, but that's awesome. I think there's definitely too. We'll talk about, culture more later in the show, but I think there's an element of relatability and, being able to like be yourself around players that seems to drive like connections and relationships, and so while it's like this funny thing, like I do think it is cool to hear. And obviously like, it sticks out in players' minds as well as you're building a team. And you've also this year, like you've graduated a lot of seniors. So you're like coming into kind of that new group. So that's pretty awesome.
Yeah, it was great. I don't know if they were cringing or like I mean, funny, who knows? But I owned that costume.
Yeah,
So,
that's awesome. Well, let's rewind a little bit. It was awesome, just doing some of our, research and kind of learning about like your upbringing and background as a player and then obviously getting to where you are today. But I believe you were, born in the Syracuse area and went to CBA, and obviously upstate's a amazing place with history for lacrosse.
mhm.
Can you talk a little bit about like your start in the sport and maybe some of your early influences that might have inspired you to get into coaching someday?
Absolutely. So, I we grew up in my family grew up in Syracuse, New York, until I got to about middle school, when we moved out to the suburbs, a town called Skaneateles. Went to CBA, and it's interesting. So, boys lacrosse was huge in the central New York area, upstate area. But I was a part of the first varsity team out of CBA. So I don't want to date myself. Maybe I shouldn't say that, but I was part of the first varsity team out of CBA. And so, really growing the sport in that area. My brother played, he was a goalkeeper at Penn State. So I really looked up to him. He and I, grew up probably old school, playing outside all the time. We were outdoor kids. When the lights came, the street lights came on, that's when we came inside at night. So, we grew up playing a ton of different sports, soccer, tennis. I mean, a lot of street hockey back in the day. So it was fun, to follow him initially and play lacrosse. And so I got my start in middle school at CBA. Was really fortunate to play for some great coaches at Carolina, Jenny Levy, Phil Barnes, Katie O'Mara, who I still am very close with to this day. And so you mentioned earlier the relationships. And so I think those are the people who inspired me to get into coaching. Initially, I wanted to go to physician assistant school. So I have all those prerequisites, all those
Yeah.
sciences and labs under my belt. But my senior year, I was able to, really, really fortunate among some of the great talent, be able to earn a spot on the national team. And I was like, wait a second, this lacrosse thing is going to end. I don't want it to end. So I got into coaching after that. But truly, I had some great coaches throughout my career, and all of them, in their own way, have inspired me to get into coaching.
And coach, you talk about the national team performance. And one thing that we kind of heard was a unique experience for you leading up to the U.S. national team and tryouts and whatnot. And I believe you may have been on a trip out of the country, and you had to find your own unique way of training for the national games. I'd be curious to hear a little bit more about that.
You must have been talking to Phil Barnes.
I don't have real sources.
Yeah. So, to get hours for PA school, we had to get a little creative because of being a Division I athlete. You can't necessarily get hours at the hospital or anything like that. So there's a clinic in Honduras, in the eastern part of the country, rural Honduras, that we found through my church at the time. And so I flew down there. Initially, it was just resorting filing cabinets. But I got to shadow a doctor who's actually he wasn't part of the Fab Five at Michigan, so Deemer, but he was on the roster. And he
That's
was an
cool.
incredible doctor that I was able to shadow down in Honduras. And so, yes, I did have to find unique ways to train. When you fly to Owas, Honduras, it's about a 5-seater plane, and you land in a field. There's just like this strip. And so that's where I would run. Just make sure there was nothing obstructing the run, cattle, whatever it was. There's snakes and scorpions down there. or any planes that are coming in. But it's interesting. They fly the planes low, so all the cattle move out of the way and anything obstructing the runway. Then they circle back. And so I had my warning if they were going to land, but that's where I trained. And it was really an impactful experience because the doctor, Gerard Rudy, who I was able to shadow, his wife was from Honduras, and she knows I love sports, all sports. And so in the free time when I wasn't shadowing him, I'd go play soccer with some of the local kids, or people thought I was crazy running, but some people would come out and join me at times. But she said to me, she's like, why are you going into the medical field? You clearly love this so much. You're good at it. This is the talent that God has given you. Go with this. And it was through my church. So that was the kind of the indication, or the background there. But that's what she encouraged me as well to get into coaching, because she's like, listen, this is important. The medical field is important, but so is what you do and the talents that you have and your passions that you have.
So what was the timing, of like training for the tryouts, like your time in Carolina? Like, was that after you graduated? Was that right, but during
So that was great question. That was between my junior and senior year summer is when I took that month down there. And then it was a quick turnaround. So I flew back 1 week and I was down at tryouts the next. I will tell you, it was very hot in Honduras, no air conditioning anywhere. And so it was an easier adjustment getting onto the 110-degree turf that summer.
I think and that's one of my favorite things about doing this podcast with Deemer is interviewing and understanding how coaches came into the profession. And I think there's kind of different categories where for some people, it's maybe their parents were coaches, and so they always knew they wanted to do that growing up. And then there's other people that I almost feel like if your parents aren't a coach, sometimes it feels like that's not even a profession to consider for a while, because you always think like you go to college and you pick a major, and I kind of did that too. And I just think it's so interesting. I found it was like a hard hurdle to get over to commit more to the coaching side. And Deemer and I both had experiences in the working world. He did finance and I was in consulting. And I guess I'm curious for you, I'm sure that was a pivotal moment, like kind of understanding that coaching is important and it is your passion and it's something that you're uniquely positioned to do. But once you got into it, I'm wondering if you ever had doubts if that was the right career for you as you got into it, or did you start coaching? You were like, I love this. This is it. I want to be a head coach at a Division I program and do this for forever.
Yeah, I tell our players this when they graduate. I am so fortunate to find a career that I absolutely love. I love the game. I love the relationships with the student athletes, and it varies, right? You have a different relationship with each student athlete. And, you mentioned the Halloween piece of it. Just having that opportunity to walk out in a men's Renaissance outfit and have the team laugh and accept you. But that's what they do for each other. And that, everybody sees what happens on game day. Everybody can check the stats or read the Twitter update, or the X updates or whatever it is, but those are the moments that keep you in coaching. The fun, the days where the light bulb goes off and they finally get it, that they're trying to hit that bottom right corner or the top left, whatever it is. When they get it, those little rewarding moments keep me coming back to coaching, because I get to watch it through their eyes and have them feel like they are reaching their potential or growing as people, whatever the case may be. But that's what the exciting piece is about coaching. When we lose, I start to reconsider my life decisions. Absolutely. Like, those are the hard times, right? But I think coming to Yale, and being around such remarkable women, and I've had so many great athletes, both at Florida when I was coaching there, and at Yale, that I've had the joy to coach and the honor to coach. But it's so exciting because you see these women are so remarkable and whatever they do. And so I've got players from Florida who are now in coaching, which is awesome and really fun to see them out on the road. and players that are doing things that they love in the nonprofit sector, and just seeing them fulfill what their dreams are and their passions are is a really exciting piece for me.
Yeah, you kind of speak on that, like Florida and Yale, and it's cool for Matt and I. Like we have some peers that were in college at the same time that I think were maybe on like your first year team that you were at Yale, and then I've gotten to know like Sam Farrell, who I think played for you. I don't know if it was all 4 years or a
All
couple
for
years.
you. Yeah.
And so and I think you were there from the start, right? Like the first or second team.
So I got to Florida and I had to beg Mandy O'Leary for this job. She would not say that, but I was like, please hire me. And she's like, no, no, absolutely not. And then finally, I think I wore her down enough. And I spent 7 years at Florida. The first year I was there, we didn't have a team. So we were just down the road recruiting, and then 6 full seasons until I arrived at Yale. So
Can
Sam's great. Still
Yeah.
keep in touch with her.
No, she's awesome. Like Sam and Kitty, like and even just thinking back to when I was getting into coaching, like I have these memories of going out to California for camps and like working with Sam and Kitty and Tommy and being like, wow, like this is awesome, So like when you speak on that of like these little moments that getting to do what you love, it's really cool. But talk about that with Mandy, because I think that's really interesting. Like you're trying to crack in. You're obviously a great player. You just made the national team. Like now you figure out that you love this, you want to make it a career. How do you go about that approach and like really try to like cut your teeth and say, hey, like I'm not just going to be a great player that's going to just show up on the sidelines. Like I really want to do this as a profession. You know, how do I get that job? How do I convince the head coach that I could be a good
Right.
fit?
That's a great question. So I worked all through high school. When I it's gonna let me explain before. So I worked, my parents owned child care centers. They did before they retired. And so I worked for them. I did everything from, you know, milk orders to working in right in the classrooms, to doing anything, administrative work, all of those things. And I will say the hardest boss, and she's gonna kill me for saying this, that I probably ever had was my own mother. I think she fired me twice. I think I lost my job with them twice. So I had to convince somebody that I have had employment in the past. And I think that was a great learning lesson. Just, working breaks and things like that. It's so funny. So even when, we get vacation in August being in the coaching world. When I was working at Florida, my mom would say, "Hi, you're back. Can you come? We need an extra set of hands for this field day we have for the child care center." So I would go back and work for them, still having a full-time job as a coach. And so I never truly got away from that piece of it until I probably got to Yale. But convincing Mandy of that. And I had friends on the national team at the time who would make introductions. So Amy Altig was a huge help, and still remains a very close friend to this day. But she introduced me she'd take me around in the tournaments and introduced me to anybody who was hiring. And that's when the begging began. So I met Mandy. I worked the camp down at Florida, and the rest is history. My interview was on the back of her scooter. So I just hopped on. She showed me around, asked me a bunch of questions. It was my first time on one of those moped,
Yep.
scooter things. I didn't know where to hold on. I didn't know where to put my feet. Like I think I held my feet up the whole time, not knowing that there was footholds in there. But it was fun. It was great. And so I really learned a lot from Mandy. And she taught me a lot that I still carry with me today. And I'm just grateful that she took a chance on me, because otherwise I might not be here right now.
You've used the word begging a few times, and
Yeah, no, it was
I
begging.
a bit. I'm going to make an assumption here that it's there's an element though to pursuing something that you really want, right? And that's a skill in itself. And if you really want something, sometimes those opportunities don't just come knocking on your door and present themselves, right? Like I think if you waited for Mandy, if you emailed Mandy one time or called her one time or asked one time, you probably wouldn't have gotten that. So begging or persistence or whatever you want to call it was valuable there. And I guess I'm curious, like I think this is good advice for, I mean, honestly, players interested in dream about going to a school, or a player graduating to dream about a certain career outside of coaching or coaching itself. I'm wondering, like, what do you think it was inside you that led to you to put yourself out there like that, to be so persistent in that pursuit? Well, I'll stay away from the word
Good
bang. That's
follow-up.
your word.
Yeah, exactly. Um, I knew I wanted to do it. As soon as I saw what it looks like on the other end, I really truly, and I love the sport. I absolutely love it. And it really enjoyed coaching camps and things like that, and getting the opportunity to, um, be a coach. I mean, that's really what it was. And obviously there's things that I had to learn. I had to learn a lot. I had to learn the administrative side. It's not just, going to practice and blowing a whistle. It's we do equipment orders. We do arrange for buses, hotels, meals, a lot of different things, recruiting, that side of it. But I think the biggest thing that I knew I wanted to be in coaching, because I love the game and I really wanted to give women an opportunity that they might not have without the sport of lacrosse. And that you mentioned Sam Farrell and Kitty, they were a part of the first class at Florida. And to watch those women achieve what they did in a short amount of time um, was one of the most rewarding experiences in my life. And that was just as an assistant coach. Mandy did an incredible job. She single-handedly recruited that class, brought them to Florida. She had a very clear vision for that group. And so to see Mandy so passionate, to see these players so passionate, and then to achieve things that they might not have, might not have dreamt of, was really important. So I think that relationship, love of the sport and the relationships with the players, and seeing them fulfill their dreams is the big part of it.
Yeah, that's awesome to hear. And I think, like, it's been really cool in general to see men's and women's, but even just more so on the women's side, just all the growth, the new programs, like seeing new programs like in all parts of the country be able to quickly have that success. You're there for, I think you said 7 years. And then how does this Yale opportunity pop up? And how do you try to get yourself ready to now make that transition from assistant to head coach?
I don't think there's anything that can prepare you to go from assistant to head coach, and just making decisions, things that potentially could come across your desk, and finding your voice as a head coach. Again, I know I talked a lot about Mandy, but I think she did a great job of modeling what that looks like. But coming here, I was able to put my own voice on it, and find that voice, to be a head coach. But I don't think anything prepares you for it. But stepping onto campus at Yale, eh, I'm not using bag mat again. I'm not using that word, but I knew that this is such a special job. And to see, I got to meet Andy Shea, who's also a Section 3 guy, upstater, on my interview. And so, to see what he's done on the men's side, of course, we initially coming in, we want to replicate that. And to see the growth in that program, and the continued growth in ours as well.
Yeah, I mean, I have more familiarity with the men's culture at Yale, just from, we played them every year pretty much, and we had some serious battles. And somehow, I'm not really sure how this happened, but we owed Yale back-to-back games at Yale my junior and senior year, and we would always be the second game of the season. So 2 years in a row in February, we bus up to Yale and we lose both games. And my both
Somebody
years,
snuck that into a contract for sure.
yeah. I was, and we were like on the back end of it, just as a player. Somehow this was like prior. Um, and we were pretty good both years, but we lost. We started off like 0-1 or 1-2 with losses to Yale in February. And it kind of, like, my impression was always a few things. One was, like, Yale was one of a few programs that I considered to have very strong culture. Like, that's a big element to who they are. And I also always felt like there's something about playing at Yale, playing there. And I'm looking at your guys' record, and I believe it was 2025, you're 9-1 at home. 2024, you're 12-0 at home. I wonder if you can just talk about I know this is kind of a broad painted question, but that culture and that element of what it means to play Yale lacrosse and what it means just to be a part of that program.
Right. I think on our side, the culture is determined by the athletes. And that's, I've really, the goals are determined by the athletes, the culture is determined by their athletes. Obviously, there's certain things that we want to instill. We want to instill, a tough, gritty, hardworking, passionate, competitive, and really fun. I mean, practices, especially this time of year, I get to have the opportunity, we get to practice today. But it's fun. Competing with joy and things like that. So that's how that's how I view our team. And there's so much pride in playing at Yale. We've been really fortunate to have the Reese brothers build a beautiful stadium, and then Josiah in recent years to build this beautiful home that we have at the Lacrosse Field House. And so that gives our women, it's a huge source of pride for them. It gives them a place to congregate before practice, or if they're, studying here or having meals here. And so it's a huge point of pride for them, but they also know that that comes with expectations and responsibility. So when we're playing in front of Lacrosse Fieldhouse, we know that we have to put our best foot forward because this program is supported. It's truly a testament to the support that Yale has for their athletics. And so I think those pieces, that pride of playing on this field is a big driving force when you come to play at Yale. I don't want to give my opponents any juice though, so that's where I'll stop.
No, of course, of course. And it's cool to see, like, and obviously now, like, some people are, getting to, see Yale women's lacrosse for the last 2 seasons that you've had, but also like a couple seasons prior, you missed 2 years, with the crazy time that was COVID, and what happened with just the Ivies being able to return to play. But then also, your first couple years record wise, we're not probably where you wanted to get to. So it's been a build, if I were to say, looking from the outside. So how has that process been? How do you get the current players to, remember that it doesn't just happen for you? And how do you, how have you continued to try to evolve the culture over the years?
Those first years, we had a lot of great student athletes. It was fun to, compete with them. I think it's hard to get the results that you want, but I will say those groups I still keep in touch with. They're so fun. They were hardworking, and it's hard to lay that foundation. It's hard to do that. And that group was steady. They were strong. They worked really hard. And I think that built for success, the success that you can see in the records in the recent years. I mean, we played, I think, we played a doubleheader back when you could do that. We played Sacred Heart and Stanford on the same day, and they thought I was nuts. But it's like, let's see what we can go out and do. And so we played Sacred Heart at noon. Stanford, I think we played them at 6. That was a risk that we took, but they found success. I mean, we won both games, and they found success in that. And so I think that really built confidence for future years and started the ball rolling. Not that one instance, but there's a few games here and there that started the ball rolling for the future teams. And so we've always emphasized, again, it's really up to them on what they're gonna put forth, but they've always been hardworking, passionate, competitive. And so I think that's helped us in recruiting. We have those 2 years off, a little bit of a reset. And then we had our high school class of 20 and 21 joined together. So we graduated 16 last year. And it just took off from there. We were in the last 4 Ivy League championship games, and I credit that group for really pushing our team forward, pushing our culture forward, and finding some success on the field. And this is a league, I think, one thing I do want to touch on is how strong our league is. And we've had 50 years of beating each other up, and especially in the world of realignment and things like that. Now, I mean, this is we've got the Yale Harvard football game coming up. And that rivalry is very real and very
Yeah.
intense. You know,
Yeah.
we have our alums. We just celebrated the 50th year of Yale lacrosse and Yale women's lacrosse. And so we have alums coming back from the 80s talking about, playing Princeton and Harvard, and they remember the score. This isn't just a couple of years or 15, 20 years. This is 50 years of history. Um, and so I think that speaks to the strength and the fortitude of our league. And it's just a really exciting league to be in because when you step out in the field and you play a conference opponent, it means a lot.
I have to imagine, and yeah, I'm just thinking about that because I think that's the incredible like thread of history and connection over the years is so powerful to make a team a part of a program versus that team just feeling like an isolated snapshot in
Right.
the point of time. I think that's such a cool thing in sports and especially at the collegiate level where you can really tie that together with some of these programs. And I do think that's more powerful than a lot of people realize when you feel like you're playing for decades of alumni that are very proud and a part of the program. I have to imagine that when you started, and you mentioned it earlier about we were talking about coaching, you had some of those moments where things weren't going your way. You take the head coaching job, you go from Florida to New Haven, Connecticut. Maybe it's not going as well. Maybe you're struggling a little bit and you're having some of those moments of reassessing.
Right.
But I also have to imagine that if you could know that in 2025, what your last couple years would have been like, you would have said, I'll take that. But you don't
Right.
know you're going to get there at that point in time.
Right.
You must have
Yeah.
developed some pretty tremendous perspective over your time at Yale. I wonder like what some of your takeaways are from that experience and growth, and maybe even some like advice you would give yourself at that point now.
Oh, geez. Um, it was a I think those times I joke around about reassessing. I think at a place like Yale, it is you have a ton of support. It's a very collaborative environment, and that's in athletics. That's on the academic side of things. We have it's just a really, really supportive environment. And so while I think those losses didn't feel great, I can remember losing to Harvard our first year and just sitting in our then at that point our athletic building, and Andy Shea walks by and he's like, I've been there, I know this, hang in there, keep going, it's going to turn. And so I think just moments like that where you're not alone are really important. And that's, I'm in a really great place, and fortunate to have people around us that can help us succeed. And so I would say, that was a big piece being at Yale, is just having that support and the people around you who, like Coach Shea, have been through this and um, have been a big part of it as well. So I think that was one of the takeaways, was just how important the people are, and who you surround yourself with. And that's including Colleen and Molly and obviously Brooklyn most recently, but how important the staff is. Colleen and Molly have dedicated so many years to Yale and to seeing us turn this, and have given the players a gift of continuity. Um, Prior to my arrival, we had some of these players had a new defensive coach each year. And so Colleen has been here for, she's starting her 10th year, and has given these players that continuity. And the same with Molly. Molly has been a steady presence for our team. She coaches the draw, she helps on the offense, and really does a lot of individual work with our players to get them where they need to be. And it's truly the people in it with you that's most important. So I think the continuity of staff has been incredibly important. And Brooklyn has been an incredible addition, winning a national championship at Carolina, having the most recent playing experience. And she really connects so well with our players, which is needed. I mean, we are a relationship-based coaching staff. And so that's a really important piece to our team and what our team needs are. So additional takeaways, um, I think is just having faith in what we do here, and that it can be done. Again, I think we've seen success at Yale before, but really doubling down on what we do and, knowing that it might not happen immediately, but it's going to take some time. And so just really staying true to my beliefs in this program and me myself as a coach. And sometimes that gets rocked. It really does. After tough seasons, it gets rocked, but you just get back to work, find some great players, but truly, whether that's coaches, whether that's players, it's the people that turn the program. And so I'm really proud that I've had some great staff members and some incredible student athletes to help build where it is today.
It's really cool to hear you talk about the staff relationships because I feel like that connectedness is huge. And, even in, again, asking, around about like the program, like even hearing things like how your kids are, whether they're in the locker room or coming out to practice, or you got maybe like movie nights at the Bamford household,
Yeah.
like things like that. Just, it sounds like you're very intentional around building that family environment. And if that's bleeding through from player to coach to yourself to your family, it just would make sense how that's just, continuing to grow and be intertwined in the culture.
Yeah, so listen, I have two boys and they're nuts, so I can't bring them around that much. They're on a one semester quota, If we hit the playoffs, that doesn't count. But yeah, I mean, I think having them be intertwined in my life and, learning about their families and what's important. I mean, I have players that come into this office and the conversation starts with, oh, where'd you get that jacket? And then an hour later, we're like, okay, so lacrosse. And every relationship is different. And we're not perfect, like none of us are. And so we try to do our best with each one of our players and build that family and that connection as best as we can. And so when the boys can come to practice or whatever, that's always an add. They come to my house maybe once a semester, once a year. And I live about an hour away, so it's a little bit tougher to get there, but we have those opportunities embedded in our plan and our schedule and things like that, just so they can see that side of things. And, it's important to me that they're a part of that as well.
I got one more on this topic, and
Yeah.
I hope I'm not saying this wrong, but can you talk to us about hammer time?
Oh God. All right. Is there a pass button? Can we pass on this one?
I have hammer time in my notes, and
No, we're going to pass on that one. We'll
I've
pass.
also seen a cover of a lacrosse
Okay.
magazine.
We're going to pass on that one. That one's off limits. That was the early years. Okay. I will say this, the Hammers have gotten brought back to the Yale lacrosse team. So
Nice.
it teaches good form.
Fall ball.
Yeah. Fall ball is the time the Hammers come out here. Yes, that is correct.
I love it. It
I
seems
can tell who's actually chopped wood and who has not done
Yeah.
that.
well,
So
it seems like it's cool, and we love hearing this just because, we haven't really talked. We haven't really talked any X's and O's lacrosse or lacrosse technique at all, and we would like to, and that's something Deemer and I love talking about. But there's also this whole element that you seem to know just and how you explain how you're building team culture, that there's this element of connection first, and we're all people, and you can know everything in the world, but if you can't connect to that player and let them know that you understand them and they understand you, it's really hard to get the same results. And so maybe before we move on to some of that player development stuff, is there any other ways that you've really prioritized like that connection piece, or with your players to really continue to build that foundation?
that starts in the recruiting process, truly. We have people come through this office that I'm not for them, and that's okay, and that's fine. And people that I think we have to realize, just not us, but when we go through the recruiting process, we like to remind high school student athletes that your game time gets so much shorter on the college level. You are guaranteed in the Ivy League 15 hours of games a year. That's it. The rest of, I mean, you think about the club system now, how much they play over the summer. I think, Deemer, you're out there just as much as they are in the summer.
Right.
So they all, how much they compete and play games. They have their high school season, they have their other sports seasons, all of that. So you have to love the game, and you have to love being out here and practicing and dedicating all that time in order to be prepared for games. And so I think that's where, especially on this level, the people are just so important. And I don't want, it probably happens, nobody's perfect, but somebody to come out and say like, oh, geez, we've got to be coached by her again, or, all of those types of things. Like, we want to find a good fit because we're going to spend a lot of time in practice together. And so I think that's a big piece of the recruiting process for us. And that's where the connection begins. It truly does begin at that point. And from there, we look for different ways to connect with our student athletes, and it's going to be different. And again, it's not going to be perfect on how we connect with each one, but as coaches, we've always been so committed to doing the best we can, and trying to get the best out of every student athlete that we can, because we want them to feel really fulfilled after their 4 years.
Yeah, it's awesome to hear. And I think like when you talk about the recruiting component and then, finding the personalities, I think the personalities also, bleed into the style of play, like from watching film on you guys, seeing you play live once or twice over the last couple of years. Like, you guys play a tough brand of lacrosse. You're gritty. You have a really aggressive zone. Like you have dynamic midfielders that are playing both ways, like, with the best of them in the country. So, finding those athletes that, really care about school and career, but also just as much care about lacrosse and being all in and being all into the culture, you have to find those right fits.
Yeah, we say lacrosse, or excuse me, school, little Freudian slip there. Okay, so school is one, their academic side of their life, and their Yale side is number one. Lacrosse is 1A, 1A. So, and we're not shy about that. It's just, it's really important to the women on our team. And so we are very transparent about that piece, and owe it to the team members to find those additional team members and those recruits that it's important to them as well.
I think that's a great designation, and I like 1A there because I always remember, but seriously, because everybody says like you go to school for school, and this, would you want to go to school if you weren't playing the sport? And I get the logic, but if you're playing the sport, it totally changes your experience at the school. Like, it's not the same as just going to the school. And so I do think for people, like, it's okay to say like, yeah, I want to make sure the school is right for me, but it's also okay to say like it's also really important that like at this school that I know at that program and I want to go there to play lacrosse.
Right.
And sometimes I feel like people, when we talk to families with recruiting, they don't give themselves permission to say that because they're trained to say, well, I want to make sure I can go to the school even if I'm not playing a sport. I'm like, well, if you are, that experience is going to be, that's a really big part of that experience.
Yeah, and it just acknowledging that obviously you want to love the school as well, but also like acknowledging that sometimes things change, and if injuries happen, things may not, the road may not be as exactly how you planned it, but it's okay to say lacrosse is, to your point, that lacrosse is important to you.
So, Coach, let's talk a little bit of skill development here. And I think I kind of want to start with a little bit of the high school and recruiting, but I think it
Mm,
ties right into what fall ball has looked like for
yeah.
you guys. First part is like, what kind of things are you seeing players come out of high school that, maybe are underdeveloped, or you find like when you're getting them, whether it's freshman fall or, still throughout, working on skills and concepts that you're having to spend a lot of time on, or you're prioritizing spending time on when it comes to, the key parts of the game and concepts.
That's a really good question. So, each year is different. So we spend probably the first week just assessing. Let me backtrack. August is the time we plan for the fall, and really we put a 12-month calendar together, a 10-month calendar. We don't go through the summer, but on what our goals are, what we think the team's going to look like, and then we spend essentially the first week, maybe a couple of days, just assessing what the needs are, because each team is going to look different and mesh differently. Our philosophy especially from the offensive end, is teach the reads, teach the skills, the reads, and let the players be the driving force out on the field. If I'm calling plays or Molly's calling plays from the sidelines, we're going to slow them down. So we allow them to play free with some general guidelines and things like that we build out, whether that's the start of the fall or the previous fall. So they've had years of that, as you might have seen last year with the players who had a lot of on-field experience, especially from the attacking end. And so each year is going to look a little bit different, based on the student athletes we have. So some years it's okay, we need to work on, last year we really dedicated a lot of time to shooting in the fall. And so we wanted to see if we could push a little bit more fast break. Unfortunately, we had some key injuries last year where that couldn't be a part of our game as strong as we would have liked it to. So we had defenders in every shooting drill. So we did a lot of transition work, a lot of, that was all of our stick work. We don't stand and pass, we don't do shuttles, things like that. We do all applicable stick work because we have less time in the fall. So we've got to maybe teach two skills at the same time. So that was what we looked at last year. This year we're young, so we are playing. We are getting as much game experience. We were able to stretch out 4 dates of competition and an alumni practice. We had 12 of our 16 seniors come back. And I was like, you guys need to train. We need another date. So what's that?
Need a good look.
Yeah, exactly. So they trained. So we were able to stretch that out. And we actually, within the Ivy rules, stretched our fall from mid-September to mid-October. So we made some adjustments there. But right now it's just gaining experience, especially on that offensive end. So that's been our dedication. And oftentimes skill development, they have to work on that on their own time because of our limited hours. They get extra reps that way.
Well, you highlight a really, important point that I think every college coach should bring up. But if you're not a college coach or a coach, you might not understand this, or the importance of it is it's not just about what skills to develop, but there's a huge factor of efficiency with that because your time is very compressed. When you probably go through your checklist with the coaches of everything you want to do, and then you look at the skill work you'd want to do, and you look at the time and the energy and the ability to do that, that becomes a real constraint. And so I'm curious, and this is something we love talking with coaches about now. You talk about teach the skills, teach the reads, let the players drive it on the field. How are you? One way to teach the reads, right, would be to put everybody on the field and be like, you can do this, you can do this, you can do this. But that's probably not the most efficient use of your time when you also need to get in conditioning. You also have to get in the skill of stick work. I'm curious maybe how you guys have worked on maybe trying to teach those things in an efficient manner to try to cover all those things.
I can give you one example. So when we want to install a transition, some of the looks in transition, we mark it out on the field, and essentially it's just passing patterns. It could be from the 50, and that's our stick work. So instead of, getting into line drills or whatever people call them these days or different things, our stick work is our clearing patterns or our transition patterns or whatever the looks are that day or that game, especially when we get into season, especially when we're scouting as well.
Yeah, it's cool to hear too on like the clearing pattern piece, because sometimes like I even find like that's, like we even had, like you mentioned Phil earlier, he did something for our, coaches community recently where he was talking about just things to work through mapping out, and like clearing patterns was one for him that he was saying, just again, like making sure you're spending time on that, and that's something that I feel like, if you're giving those possessions back, it's like, it's hard to overcome when you're in a lot of the close games in such a competitive conference too.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, he's big on the clears and things like that. I watched one of our basketball practices here at Yale. I just went over, took some notes, and they rep their passing patterns up and down the court like time and time again. And so I took part of that from them, but just really doing it so that you can get efficiency, get as many touches on the ball as you can. You're not going to do 11 player skeleton clears. You just minimize it, so minimize the number of players so they get the maximum number of touches as well. So, and it helps with conditioning. It helps with stick work under when they're tired and things like that. So you can hit a lot of different categories and a lot of different needs with those types of drills.
One thing that I think is interesting when thinking about, like, especially on the women's side, like practice planning, development, I think last year I did the numbers and it was like maybe 9 of the 16, final teams were playing zone. And maybe like
Mhm.
team number 10 kind of was more hybrid, kind of in and out. On the men's side, it's, mostly man and then some wrinkles from the zone side. And I feel like when I've coached women's offense in the past, trying to allocate time to, again, man-to-man scheme versus how are you working on your zone offense, like it's a hard balance, like, and then when you throw in the wrinkle and constraint for you guys for the limited time, I think your defense plays mostly zone, but like how do you just as a coach try to get the players to see both concepts, spend enough time on each when you're seeing a lot split during the season?
Great question, Deemer. It's a hard balance.
Yeah.
So we try to do a couple of things very well. We can't do it all. I think we've tried to go back. We've done man to man, we've done zone, and obviously we have contingency plans in our back pocket always. And I'm prepping those as well for season, and those are long-term plans, right? So we can do both. But I think we don't want to be a master of none. So we keep it simple, both on the offense. We don't have a 30-page playbook on what to do, but we really try to lean on our chemistry and build chemistry throughout the year. And basing that on like when I can't emphasize it enough, very simple concepts. More simple, the better. And so, I was watching some of the things that you have on your Instagram as far as, of course, I'm like watching our own team. But those are the things we see in practice all the time. And sometimes those are like passing patterns and just having shoulders to ball and like little things like that, where they are simple, but they are detailed. And so, if you can teach the reads, they can play a man-to-man or a zone offense against that. And then I think it's a little bit harder defensively to go back and forth, but now you have to have both.
Right.
You can have your primary, but you do have to have contingency plans. People can read the zones now, and they get to notice your patterns and things like that. So we like to mix it up there too.
Yeah, and then just being ready, whether it's, a single face guard or double face guard, like, and that obviously when the back half of the season comes into play, you start, seeing that stuff where you guys are seeing teams again in the Ivy tournament. I find it interesting when you talk about like those simple concepts. Like one thing I found that I'm doing some offensive skill sessions with the girls is when we're trying to teach reads, like, drawing an adjacent player and throwing it forward, like even teaching even if they're attackers, like the concept of hedging and getting back, like that fake slide or show. And that's kind of where I always find it interesting in our shoes of like where do we focus? Like where are players coming in maybe needing to have developed more in high school
Right.
to help be more college ready when they get to or they get to any coach. Those are things that are always like so interesting with just how the game continues to evolve.
Absolutely. I mean, everybody needs good shooters, so that's a good start. Everybody needs good shooters. And then, we watch players off ball and how they're helping the 6 other players around them. And are they cutting through at the right time? Are they dodging through doubles? Are they doing things that are helping their team, or is it helping themselves? And I think a big piece of what we teach, especially here or when we're trying to teach at camps, is how do you work with the 6 other people around you? Because that's integral to helping your offense run or your defense run. You can be the best defender in the country, but if you can't slide for your teammate, that creates a gap in the defense, and that's really difficult. So I think everybody needs a good shooter. I will say that. And then teaching how to be a good, productive teammate, obviously, while having an impact yourself, especially from the offensive perspective.
You mentioned this earlier. What is your expectation for players in the regard of like extra work and skill development on their own? As you kind of mentioned, I think a lot of coaches would say, like, if you are struggling with some of the basics, like we don't have time in practice to get
Right.
that to where it needs to be because we need to do our full patterns and do these drills of these more
Right.
dynamic scenarios. So I wonder maybe what's your expectation of the players, or is there a way you communicate that with players on what they should be doing outside of practice?
Right. I think we start with getting the players' goals on what they want. Because if it's not driven intrinsically, it's never going to happen. I can't be the one to say, okay, this is the number, but I can help coach and teach. Okay, if you want this, this is the way to get there. So um, it's usually pretty player specific. We're not allowed to give them any instruction outside of practice to say, like, okay, I know we can't be there, but go, shoot 100 balls right, left, from this angle, whatever it is. But it's really player specific on what they need, where they want to go, and we can lay out a path there. So if you want to be on the field and you want to be a midfielder, okay, maybe go see our strength and conditioning coach for some extra conditioning drills. And that a lot of it's part of our culture. If we do a shooting drill, they're going to probably go out and do it the next day on their own.
Yep.
And that is, to be honest, that's our leadership, and that's our senior and junior classes, and it's always been that group. Even graduating 16, our seniors this year have really done an incredible job in leading in their own way, and that's been exciting to see because they've emerged and doing it the way they think is best, and it's been great. So, that fit their personality or their style. So it's been really rewarding to see their leadership styles come through this year.
Yeah, it's cool to hear because I think the authenticity piece to that is crucial. Like not everyone's a yeller, not everyone's super vocal.
Right.
Some people lead by example,
Mm,
but then at the same time, like you might need someone who is a quieter player when they get older to use their voice more,
right.
and find those. I think one of the last things I'd ask as we start to wind down here is, how do you try to have those conversations with players to inspire that leadership or help them find their voice, which is something that you talked about, you finding your voice as a head coach. Like, has anything helped you to, you know, instill that in them?
I'm just thinking back to one of the conversations that we've had on this. It's like, okay, we had, I'm going to tell you, I'll touch on those 16 seniors who graduated. They did it their own way as well. They love to get out and shoot. And that was a place social, not only were they accomplishing things, but it was social for them. They would just come out to the field and play on their off days or shoot before games or shoot before practice. And so I think players have seen that. And now watching our senior class this year, they have led in their own way. But I think when asking players to lead, it's encouraging them to be themselves and that authenticity. And so you mentioned connection earlier in the conversation, and it's not like we manufacture connection. It's something that has to happen on its own. I think when you manufacture connection, it feels transactional. It doesn't feel authentic. And so I think in having that understanding that you may not have the same connection with one player and another, and that's okay. And so I think with the leadership conversations, it's the same thing. This is what I see in you. This is how I think you can lead, but ultimately it's your decision. It's going to be up to you on how you want to do this. But I think you're funny. I think you make me laugh every single day, and that's a big part. Like, humor is a big part of what we do too. I mean, we have a great time in practice. It's hard, it's intense, all of that. But that's what you bring to the table, and that's got to be your role. And we need you to step up and be another voice, and be a non-threatening voice using your humor. Another is really nurturing. And so you just say, listen, you are very, very nurturing. Our first years are, learning right now the schemes, they're going to their classes. maybe pull them in, have a conversation with them. And so teaching them different ways that maybe would work for them, but ultimately trying to give them tools, individual tools. But ultimately, it's going to be up to them how they want to do it. And I think that discovery part is so important for them because it's going to build their own confidence as leaders. And it's going to feel really authentic to their teammates as well.
Yeah, I love that. I think that's something to the point of like sometimes people they model themselves off of who they want to be. Everybody's role models, right? And so they think they need to be like their role models. And I remember going through this, and that was really intimidating because I was like, that's just not me. But like, I know that guy is doing the things I want to do, and I really look up to him.
Mhm.
And there was this whole art to like kind of figuring out like I can have an impact that's maybe as meaningful as that person, but it
Right.
won't be the same way, right?
Absolutely.
And at
And
the end of the day, we both care about the same thing, but
right.
like my personality is going to get there a different way. And that I think for some players is a really, it's less intimidating than to have to try to be something you're not.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's also what makes, I love our team. I absolutely love our team. And part of what I love about them is they're so accepting. Do they get on each other probably like sisters? Absolutely. Like it wouldn't be a team if there wasn't that. But, I think everybody accepts each other for who they are as genuine people. And we can come again, circling back to that, we can come out dressed as men from the Renaissance and it's a funny experience and fun and exciting and everybody just accepts, you know, each other for who they are and their personality. And I think that's what makes leaders on this team emerging so seamless.
I do want to say, I when you were kind of mentioning some of the examples too of like either conversations you've had or like direct ones you could think of, I really appreciate you sharing that because like one thing I love selfishly about when we get to have interviews like this is, Matt and I get to learn, and I think sometimes out there it's like hard to learn as a young coach like how to do things. Obviously, there's one side, like everyone's different. There's no like one way of doing things, but sometimes like when it is a blank canvas or you're just learning, like hearing things said a certain way is really impactful. So like, I think for any coaches listening to the podcast, like my view is like some of the things you just said, like exactly how you phrase those things, I can just imagine that being really powerful to helping a player unlock their potential, not just on the field, but connecting with their teammates and being a leader. So I appreciate you sharing that.
On the topic of authenticity, we talked about it before. I'm not sure if it made the cut, but I think we just got to talk about the best pizza in New Haven on the
I knew
records.
you were gonna, I knew this, you were going to circle back to this one. I, you know what? I'm just gonna, we've got a lot of great pizza spots here. I'm gonna let you, you guys are gonna have to come up here. You're gonna have to decide on your own, do the Pizza World Tour. There's a lot of great pizza spots here. All right, I lean towards bar. Okay, I said it.
All right.
Wow. All
Bar
right.
pizza, there you have it. But I think there's a lot people, Sally's, Pepe's, Modern, and Bar seem to be the four big ones in our area. And there's a lot. This is a hot take. This is a hot debate here. So can't go wrong with any of them.
We'll give you a heads up if this makes the social cut so that you can prepare yourself heading into practice the next day.
Oh, I know.
I have been to Sally's. I will say
That one's
I
great too, Sally.
thoroughly enjoyed that. It was an old school joint, super cool. But I definitely would love to get up there and try some of the others. And Coach Nesdale and I have been going back and forth about trying to make a visit as well. So I think this
And
would only make sense.
each one has unique. So Bar is the mashed potato bacon pizza.
Ooh.
Um, Pepe's has the white clam pie, and I'm gonna have to get back to you on the other two. But each one has its own specialty on what they do. So
I
got to
think
try
I
it all.
had, I think I had Pepe's this summer. Somebody else ordered it, and it
You
was
would know. You would know,
Sounds forgettable, Matt.
that was good. I was
Wow,
really
it's
good
really
pizza.
good, huh?
I just don't remember.
Did you have to wait in line to get in?
Somebody else ordered and they waited a while and they brought it back to the because we
Can't do that. You cannot take
really
it. No, cannot take any of this pizza to go. This is not a to go thing. You've got to go in. It's
maybe
got to
somebody
be on
stole
the
it.
thin pizza sheet, So
I'll get back to you on that. We had a PLL thing in Fairfield, and we stayed in New
Okay.
Haven.
Okay.
And so maybe it was some B tier pizza that I got that I was
It
missing.
could have been. Yeah, and I'm telling it's if you go to Pepe's, you have to go to the one in New Haven. You have to dine in at all of these places. Just so you know, it's not for the full experience.
Yeah, no
Yeah,
shortcuts.
there's a lot of rules around pizza here, huh?
I'll report back. I must have been misled in the pizza experience I was having.
Yeah, you can't do that. No,
Well,
dine in only, guys. All right.
no
All
better
right.
way to cap off an interview on authenticity than getting into the heavy hitting stuff at the end.
Exactly, exactly. I said it. I can't believe I was really just gonna
You know, you're gonna give us the coach
nothing.
speak around it all.
I know. Well, each one does something very nice.
Yes,
know,
yeah.
Each unique pizza. But celebrated our 25 season and our 24 season of bar pizza too. So
Mm,
I think it's a team favorite as well.
okay.
Holds a special place in my heart for that.
I love it. Well, Coach, we can't thank you enough for your time.
you.
This was awesome learning from you, hearing about your story. We're excited to watch and follow along for you guys in 2026. Wishing you the best, and
Thank you so
thanks
much
for coming on.
Thank you so much. This has been fun. I really appreciate the opportunity to be here with you guys today, and just really appreciate the invite onto your podcast. So thank you.
Of course, it was great having you, Coach.